بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد فرقان الحميد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال تزرعون 7 سنين دأبا فما حصدتم فذروه في سنبله إلا قليلا مما تأكلون صدق الله العظيم. So last week we had left off at a very critical moment where the former inmate of the jail, now the current wine pourer for the king, he is running back to Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. He informs the king, Rayyan bin Walid, that send me back to this person in jail. I will come back with the information about this dream. I will give you the interpretation, the plan, all the details. فَأَرْسِلُونَ, send me to Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. And the point that we were trying to make and we were reiterating is that when a person is sincere and he is true and he is devout to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then in all challenges of his life, in all facets and aspects, divine help will come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam is sitting at the bottom of the jail. Oblivious to him is this dream of the king. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is facilitating, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is arranging. Similarly, in the second surah of the Quran, at the time of Bani Israel, when the murder happened, and how the people of Bani Israel are confused, and they are in suspicion that who is the murderer of this person. They find a dead body, a murdered body. They want to know who murdered this body. So they come to Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them that slaughter a cow and then strike the dead man's body, the corpse, with the piece of this meat, and he will be revived, and then he will say قتلني فلان أو فلان, and then he will die a natural death. So Bani Israel are now in search of this cow. وإذ قال موسى لقومه إن الله يأمركم أن تذبحوا بقرة قالوا أتتخذنا هزؤا قال أعوذ بالله أن أكون من الجاهلين. Then they start asking all these questions. Wait, what type of cow is this? What color is this cow? ما هي؟ قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة لا فارض ولا بكر عوان بين ذلك فافعلوا ما تؤمرون. It's neither an old cow nor a young cow in the medial age. Just do what you're told. And they have more questions. ما لونها؟ قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة صفراء فاقع لونها. It's deep yellow, bright in yellow, beautiful in color, تسر الناظرين, pleasing to the eye. And they have more questions. ما هي؟ قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة لا ذلول تثير الأرض ولا تسقي الحرث مسلمة لا شية فيها. It's a cow that has not been put to work, not has toiled the land, not been made to plant. مسلمة لا شية فيها, perfect in nature, not a single defect, not a single fault. قالوا الآن جئت بالحق. Okay, now you come with the truth. So they're asking all of these different questions, but the original order was to slaughter a cow, slaughter any cow, and it will work. But now that they started asking questions, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the stringent conditions, and now they're looking for a very specific cow. So they find a cow that's young, but it's not, or they find a cow that's middle-aged, but it's not yellow in color. And they find a cow that's yellow in color, and it's middle-aged, but it's been put to work. And then they find a cow that's middle-aged, and it's yellow, not been put to work, but it has a defect. Now they're strenuously looking throughout the lands until they come to the house of a young man. They come to the house of a young man. The point that I'm trying to make is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitates. They come to a house of a young man. This young man is the only one in the land that they can find in possession of a cow with these qualities. And he is in need of this cow because he uses it for sustenance to feed his old mother, his aging mother. He uses the cow's milk and he gives it to his mother. The people of Bani Israel come to him. We need your cow. So he says, okay, you seem to be in desperation. I also need this cow because it is part of my livelihood and sustenance. He's a poor man living hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, barely making means, barely making sustenance. He says, give me the weight of this cow in gold and the cow is yours. Now Bani Israel has no choice. They give him the weight of the cow in gold. Overnight, he went from a person who didn't know where his next meal was coming from to having enough money to become a cattle farmer. Why the Mufassirun write? Because he was dutiful to his mother. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repaid him based on that dutifulness to his mother. What is the point? How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitates, how He arranges. Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam innocently languishing in the jail. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitates. So the king has this dream. The people tell him, adghat wa ahlam, it's muddled thoughts. Don't give it any heed, don't give it any mind, leave it. But the one who was saved, he remembers udkurni, that hey, I remember that there was this guy in the jail, send me to him فأرسلون. He comes to Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam without any hesitation, without any apology, without any this, that, dragging the story out. He goes directly into his maqsad. I came for the interpretation of this dream. لَعَلِّي أَرْجِعُ إِلَى النَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. Perhaps I can go back to the people. They can know the interpretation of this dream, but they can also know what a reliable, talented man you are. Now Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam reciprocates. He also goes straight, direct into the ta'bir, into the interpretation. If it was you or I, the first thing on our mind would be, hey buddy, didn't you forget about me? What happened? I told you to remind me to the king. How audacious you are, how bold and brazen. Now you're coming to me asking me for a favor? What happened when I told you to remind me to the king? But Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, this is not his personality. He goes direct into the interpretation. قال تزرعون سبع سنين دأبا. As the Mufassirun write, ازرعوا سبع سنين دأبا. You will plant and you will harvest for 7 years دأبا, continuously. 7 years back to back to back, you will plant, you will grow, you will harvest, you will reap, you will sow. تزرعون سبع سنين دأبا فما حصدتم فذروه في سنبله. Whatever you harvest, whatever you reap, whatever you sow, whatever is planted and comes out, then leave it in its original covering. Leave it in the ear, leave it in the stalk, leave it in the covering of corn. فَذَرُوهُ فِي سُنبُلِهِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِمَّا تَأْكُلُونَ. Except for that little bit which you have to eat. What you have to eat, of course, you take it out, you peel it, you eat it. But whatever the rest that you store, make sure you cover it and you leave it in its original wrapping. Why? For storage purposes, so the insects don't get into it. For long life, or they say life, shelf life, long shelf life. Nowadays they put all these preservatives, they put this, that. Food never goes to waste. At that time they needed shelf life. How are we going to preserve this corn for seven years? Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam gave them the plan. Now look at the amazing personality of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. The dream of the king was that they had 7 ears of corn that were dry, 7 that was green, 7 cows that were fat, 7 cows that were thin. Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam was only instructed to give them the interpretation. The interpretation is only the ta'bir. That's what we refer to as the ta'bir, the interpretation of the dream. But Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam went above and beyond. He gave them the interpretation of the dream. The interpretation stopped at تزرعون سبع سنين دأبا. That was that was the end of the ta'bir, the interpretation. فما حصدتم فذروه في سنبله إلا قليلا مما تأكلون. This is what we refer to as tadbir. That after I have interpreted the dream for you, now let me tell you what the method and the plan is going forward. I'm not going to leave you guys in chaos. So you don't know how to navigate. You don't know how to overcome these obstacles. Let me tell you how to plan. So he says, this is the plan that you're going to adhere to. And then he didn't leave it there. He also followed it up with what we call tabshir. If you were to follow this plan, then let me tell you what glad tidings are at the end. If you were to make it out of this 7 years of famine, let me tell you what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in store for you. قال تزرعون سبع سنين دأبا. This is تعبير. فما حصدتم فذروه في سنبله إلا قليلا مما تأكلون. This is تبشير. This is تدبير. ثم يأتي من بعد ذلك سبع شداد يأكلن ما قدمتم لهن إلا قليلا مما تحسنون. ثم يأتي من بعد ذلك سبع شداد. Then after that the 7 years of planting, the 7 years of harvesting, sab'un shidad, there's going to be 7 years that are severe. 7 years of no food, 7 years of no rain, 7 years of no crop. sab'un shidad يأكلن ما قدمتم لهن. يأكلن ما قدمتم لهن. This is isnadi majazi. It's going to consume, it's going to eat up, it's going to dry, it's going to replete all the resources that you had from before. Whatever you put aside, whatever you had put in storage, whatever you had sent forth, that is going to be depleted and consumed. ثم يأتي من بعد ذلك سبع شداد يأكلن ما قدمتم لهن إلا قليلا مما تحصنون. Except for that little bit of grain which you store to plant. So you have a few seeds that you keep to store to plant for the next year, that will stay fine. Other than that, the 7 years will consume everything. It will leave you guys dry, replete, with absolutely no food. Now, in the dream of the king, he also mentioned that there were seven fat cows that were being eaten by seven thin cows. And in the interpretation of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, you don't see any mention of any cows. The Mufassirun write that the reason why he didn't give the interpretation of the cows is because it was understood from how he was navigating or orally displaying the interpretation that the reason of this drought is going to be so severe that it's going to afflict man and it's also going to afflict animals as well. So it's not going to be just that man is going to be at difficulty, but the crops are going to be fine or the animals are going to be fine. This famine, this drought is going to be so severe, it's going to afflict man and it's going to afflict animals as well. The whole earth as a whole, the whole land as a whole is going to be suffering. Then Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam finishes it off with what we call tabshir, and he gives him glad tidings. ثم يأتي من بعد ذلك عام فيه يغاث الناس وفيه يعصرون. And then after that there will be a year that will come, and in it there will be plentiful rain. عام فيه يغاث الناس. Rain will be plenty, غيث, rain. وفيه يعصرون. And in it then you will again be able to take out the fruit and squeeze the fruit and make grapes, an indication towards a beautiful future at the end, the light at the end of the tunnel. The Mufassirun write that how did Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam come with this at the end? How did he understand that this year is coming? How did he know? They have two interpretations or two opinions. One is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them by wahi that at the end this is what is coming. And another opinion is that Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam was able to understand this from the general happenings and the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that with every difficulty at the end there will come ease. So after 7 years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then replenish the earth and give them ease again. There is this beautiful, beautiful paper that has been written where a person wrote a thesis on how an Islamic society works, functions, and can develop based on this ayah alone, and how a general society can work from the ayat of the Quran based on this verse. قَالَ تَزْرَعُونَ سَبْعَ سِنِينَ دَأْبًا. The world that we live in, and I read this paper from BBC not too long ago, they said that the 1% of the richest people in the world have more revenue, more capital, and more wealth than the rest of the other 99. And the rich are only getting richer and the poor are only getting poorer. And the society that we live in, it filters towards this, it fuels this. And this is how life is. A society, and this is the Quran does not teach us this, that the rich just get richer and the poor just get poorer. Instead, it teaches us towards selflessness. So every year that the rich distribute to those people who are poor, كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ, so that the rich don't just adhere and stick there and have this wealth. How beautiful was this interpretation of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, and how beautiful he set it up and he structured it for the years to follow. Now this person comes running back to the king. Hey, you guys were saying muddled thoughts. You guys said adghatu ahlam. These people don't know what they're talking about. Let me tell you the destiny of Egypt, and let me also just tell you what an amazing man is sitting at the bottom of this jail. How does the king react? Inshallah, we'll do that next week. واخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت، وعافنا فيمن عافيت، وتولنا فيمن توليت، وبارك لنا فيما اعطيت، وقنا واصرف عنا شر ما قضيت، فانك تقضي ولا يقضى عليك، انه لا يعز من عاديت ولا يذل من واليت، تباركت ربنا وتعاليت. نستغفرك ربنا ونتوب اليك. اللهم اهدنا واهد بنا واهد الناس جميعا واجعلنا سببا لمن اهتدى. اللهم احسن ختامنا وتوفنا على كلمه لا اله الا الله محمد رسول الله. اللهم اجعلنا من عبادك الصالحين. اللهم اجعلنا من أهل الجنة، اللهم اجعلنا من الذين لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون، ولا تجعلنا مع القوم الظالمين، ولا تجعلنا مع القوم الكافرين. يا مصرف القلوب صرف قلوبنا على طاعتك، يا مثبت القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. اللهم طهر قلوبنا وأعمالنا من النفاق اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم، وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. آمين يا رب العالمين.